Malaria is caused by Plasmodium parasites, and there's many different kinds of Plasmodium parasites, or many different species, but there's 5 main ones that can infect people. Now, I've listed some facts about these 5, but I'm just going to point out a couple of key things about them. Plasmodium falciparum, the one that I've listed first, is found worldwide, but it's the predominant species in Africa, and it's also in many ways the most dangerous or most likely to cause severe malaria. And this is why when we think about the number of people who die from malaria, it's very often children in Africa, because this is the predominant species in Africa. So they're being infected with this one that's most likely to cause severe malaria. Plasmodium vivax is actually the one that infects the most people, and that's because it's predominantly found in Asia and Southeast Asia, in the places where we have really high population density. And so there's just a higher percentage of people, or a higher number of people, that are at risk of being infected with this, although it's not as dangerous as the falciparum form of malaria. This kind can also, though, live as a dormant form in the liver. So when we see relapsing malaria years or months or years later, it's often this form. And I'll let you read about the other ones yourselves. Now, malaria is passed to humans from the Anopheles mosquitoes. And just like there's multiple Plasmodium species, there's multiple Anopheles mosquitoes too. And so there's around 40 different kinds of Anopheles mosquitoes that can pass malaria to people. And that's just because of their range and whether they bite and whether they can carry the Plasmodium parasites or not. And I would have you notice here that even large parts of the United States are covered by Anopheles mosquitoes. Now, so the range is much wider than the actual range of malaria that we still see now, and that's from a few different things. But what we'll see is one of the big things about whether the Anopheles mosquito passes malaria to people or not is whether the weather is wet and warm enough for the Plasmodium parasite to have enough time to develop inside the Anopheles mosquito before that mosquito bites a person and is eventually killed. Okay, so the mosquito has to live long enough. And so, but what I do want you to notice is that big parts of this range overlaps with the range of malaria infection. And if we look at the Anopheles mosquito life cycle, each adult female can lay 50 to 100 eggs on the surface of the water, and these eggs will hatch in 2 to 3 days into a larval form. The larvae will go through 4 different stages, or instars, and then eventually form a pupa before hatching as an adult mosquito. Now, that larval development and pupa development in the water, or the aquatic phase of this, in general lasts 7 to 14 days, depending on the species and really depending on the temperature. So here again is that idea that temperature is important, and when we're in warmer areas, this can happen faster. Once we have an adult female, it can take a blood meal from an animal or a human, and then it's ready to lay eggs 2 to 3 days after that. Now, only a small percentage of these female mosquitoes live long enough for the malaria parasite to develop fully so that that mosquito can infect another person. And it's really a minimum of 9 days in optimal conditions. So we're actually very lucky in this way. It would be a lot worse if the parasite could develop faster, because we'd have more opportunity for these mosquitoes to infect us. So this is kind of good news, but even still, it's bad enough that enough of them can do it in this 9 days. Okay, if we look then at the malaria life cycle, we have a number of different stages. So we'll start kind of right here at 1. And this is where the infected mosquito bites a person, and the parasite in this form of the sporozoites is in the saliva of the mosquito. So when the saliva is injected into the person during the feeding, in also comes these sporozoites. And in humans, they first go to the liver. And in the liver, they go through their first stages of development and reproduction. And then eventually they form this schism, which can break open and infect the bloodstream of the person. When we're in the blood, the parasite actually enters inside our red blood cells, goes through several more stages of development. It can then make more of these schisms, which then are going to rupture and produce more. So that we have an internal life cycle inside the red blood cells. But we can also then form these gametocytes, or the reproductive cells of the parasite, which then, when another mosquito comes along and takes in a blood meal from this person, the mosquito becomes infected with the the Plasmodium parasite. Then there's a whole round of development. This is what takes the 9 days inside the mosquito before these sporozoites are ready to be in the saliva to infect another person. I should mention also that this parasite doesn't actually damage the mosquito in any ways. It's only damaging to us. Okay, in the next video, we'll look at some of the factors that are important for infection and how to prevent infection.